Counting down in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Mr. Mark Ashmore, welcome to CamTalks.
Hi, this is like a dream come true. I'm a fan. I've watched them on Instagram, and here I am in my little box in CamTalk world.
I have a fan. I love it. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the show. Obviously, look, as much as you are a fan of my work, I am a huge fan of you, your work. Everything you've ever done as an entrepreneur has only motivated me to go further. So, Mark, give my audience a little bit of a rundown of who you are and how we met.
Okay, so how we met was probably 7 or 8 years ago when you were a student, first or second year student at FutureWorks, and you had this kind of go-get-in spirit, which I guess as an entrepreneur, as a fellow entrepreneur, you can kind of pick up on that thing. And so we got chatting, and I followed some of your stuff, and I was interested, and we sort of always collided in the corridor and chatted.
It was always the corridor, right?
Yeah, which you can't do now, which is rubbish in this lockdown world. So that's how we met. We met because we were aware of each other, and we collided in the corridor, and we both took time out, 10 minutes to chat while people are coming through with the deadlines and their books, and you're like, and you kept saying, I know you're really busy, and then you carried on talking. I'm like, I'm not, I'm cool. Just keep going. This is cool. I'm never one of these people to say I'm always busy. I think that's shit when people say that.
But it was that time that you gave me that made me feel that my ideas were validated, particularly when talking to, even the lecturers at FutureWorks. I love them, but their lecturers, they have to keep the students on track. And it was actually because we were editing one of your feature films. We were doing it as part of our course. And I remember you coming in to kind of give us a little bit more information about that. And as much as I was like, yeah, great, I love the curriculum, I love editing this trailer, what I was more interested in is just getting 5 minutes with you. Just as at any time, I was just like, Mark, can I just speak to you? I've got a really good idea. And you're like, yeah, go for it, mate. And then, other people come up to you like, Mark, when you made that film? I'm like, shut up. It's not about that film. Like, it's about the future, So which kind of brings us on to Future Artists. Because, this is a company that you've run for, nearly a decade now?
Oh my God, don't say that. Yes, it is. I think it's 11 years in May that's just gone, but we were no way celebrating it. So yeah, it is 11 years.
11 years, incredible. And tell me, what was the sort of aim of Future Artists?
Dead simple aim. Yeah, there was a dead simple aim when we started, which was our first event was just like a networking event, and me and my business partner at the time, Jenny, we set up through Twitter, because Twitter was quite new. It was 2009. So Facebook was about 2007, YouTube's 2005, Twitter's about 2007-ish. And with all this new technology was connecting people up. And so we thought, well, if we could get a load of creatives together that always wanted to make feature films and then somehow connect with our audience using this new technology, could we do stuff like, I guess what Netflix is now is probably what we had in mind. And so we set up just a networking event, and the tagline was, not part of Media City yet. And so Media City was just being built in Salford, and it wasn't open yet. And we were like, well, are we going to be part of Media City, or can we build our own Media City? Like, what's that conversation? Because as you know, the industry is there's huge walls around it, and how do you get in? So not part of Media City yet. And that was the conversation we were going to have on a day in Saturday as part of the Manchester International Festival. So we got a free space and some publicity from that. And so that's how it began, and then it just sort of morphed and has changed and has adapted to its surroundings. It is in its essence, it's always difficult to explain to this what it is, but in its essence, it's an arts collective. It's me leading it and being part of stuff, and it is basically lots of creatives, lots of people from theatre and film, and now technology and arts and performers and poets and musicians. And we come together and we solve problems, and we solve problems for clients now. So we're solving problems for shopping centres because they're like, how do we bring people in? And we're like, well, try this. We solve problems for in documentaries, like stories we want to tell. We fund people now if we like the work and we want to support them. So like Clementine Bog Hargroves, who's doing Skank, It's a theatre play that we're funding at the moment. So no Arts Council needed, we can fund it. But 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. We didn't know what we were doing. And the company has gone bust like twice, almost bust. We've managed to salvage it, but on life support. And now we're in lockdown, COVID-19, and the company is actually kind of thriving in a weird way because of the way that we've built it and the infrastructure. So we're used to digital and virtual working and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say we invented the term, but we've been doing it for 10 years. And we find ourselves doing stuff like this, which is very natural. And we're very open on social media. So yeah, in a nutshell, Future Artists is an arts collective. We've been doing it for 10 years. We sometimes don't know what we're doing, but then our tagline is, without deviation from the norm, progress is not possible. So how are you going to progress if you know the answer already? You just got to go and find out.
This is really, really interesting, Mark, because, I haven't, been in the world of business now for a number of years. I'm always shocked to see technically qualified people demanding creative and knowing that they need creative, they need creativity, they need creative people, they need a social media manager. And they think they need all this shit that comes from the creative world. And yet they're not willing to be honest with themselves. They're not willing to fail. They're not willing to experiment. And so when I first met you and you were like, oh yeah, like fucking, we're gonna make whatever we want to make. You want to start a coffee shop? We'll start a coffee shop. You want to fund this person's art? And I kept thinking, I was like, is this a good business? Like, is it a good business to want to encourage people to do creative endeavors? And in my head, I thought, yeah, of course it is. It's the only thing worthwhile doing, and so it's interesting that now you've kind of been able to monetize it and work with brands and work with people to solve their problems using creativity. But it seems like you'll never forget your roots, with the experimentation and the deviation from the norm.
Well, what's interesting, as you were saying that, and I was thinking, how can I make a relevant point back? We were probably saying things that there wasn't a tag for what we were doing. So you couldn't say we're this. And I think what we were very early social media influencers in a way. So there's a whole marketplace now. There's loads of them. Every different niche is covered by some sort of influencer. There's somebody doing knitting on YouTube, and they've got huge businesses there. We've both read that book, so we know that reference there. And then there's somebody doing clothing, and everybody's doing makeup. But we were out there saying, like, influencers for stories. So if there was a documentary that we were passionate about, so Restrepo, which was a dog wolf film, which was about soldiers in Afghanistan, and we were one of their first people to do their pop-up cinema, which basically Dog Wolf gave us the rights. We went to some pop-up spaces in Salford, and this was like 8 years ago, and we went to an audience who we thought would like the film and invited them to a non-cinema space to watch a documentary about soldiers in Afghanistan that went on to win Oscars and things like that. But not only did Dog Wolf give us the opportunity to do that, which was radical in itself, it was a new form of cinema distribution, but we then connected with audiences and influenced them to come to a space on a rainy, cold Tuesday, and we sold out Islington Mill for a pop-up cinema with a projector and a laptop and a screen with made out of a bed sheet. And that was like, this could be the future of this model. But we were influencing the sphere and being part of a social media conversation, which is all that's happening now. Community managers, as you mentioned, influencers, even this vlog podcast is part of that infrastructure. But we were trying to build all that and convince people that it existed, while people were going, we don't know what you're talking about.
But I think what was interesting is the fact that I don't think your community would be as strong or as engaged if you weren't based up north. It seems like Manchester was your hub, and for a very long time you couldn't really talk to anyone in the creative industry who didn't know Mark Ashmore or Future Artists. So I don't know whether you feel like Manchester as a hub kind of gave you that opportunity more so than anywhere else.
I think what Manchester gave us and still gives us, and even though I'm not living in Manchester at the moment, I always say I'm from Manchester. I've been there 15 years, and I'll be going back. I'm moving out shortly, and I'll be going back to Manchester. Manchester allows you to fail, and it doesn't mind. It almost expects you to fail, so that it can pick you back up again. And if you pick yourself back up again in Manchester, people want to support you even more. And as I said in the opening there, we've probably failed spectacularly twice. And because we are on social media, because I'm a bit of a public face of this entire thing, when I fail, I'm failing in public, and I'm failing to the people of Manchester. And the wider we go, the more people know. And that's kind of horrible in a way, because you do get people, you know who your friends are when you fail.
Yes.
You get stabbed in the back, and you know you owe people money, and you're paying it off. And I've paid everybody off that I've ever owed, but I failed financially. Is only the way that I failed, because creatively you learn new stuff and things like that. But yeah, when you're in Manchester's quite small, and so yeah, everybody gets to know each other, and it will support the people that are out there doing stuff, which is why we're supporting people in Manchester now. We're in a position where we can do it, so we can give back. But for, I don't know, 7 years, we were flailing all over the place trying to figure out who we were, what we were doing. People were taking risks with us. People were like helping us. And that's because Manchester's got that nucleus, and it's small enough to allow that.
I think it almost feels like the underdog, you know, in the UK, you know, and I think because of that, it means that we are, well, I say we, you know, I even consider myself from Manchester. You know, I went there 2010. I was there for 8 years, and I've never felt so much of a community. And I think that obviously the Manchester Arena bombings, when that happened, and you know, suddenly bumblebees
that was next to my flat as well. Like, my flat was one away from it, so the police, my flat was all police cordoned off.
Wow. So you were there at the time?
I was in Edinburgh, so I'm not gonna say I wasn't there, but I came back on the day after it happened, and my train was due back, and it was I was upset, I was shaken, because I was for the people of Manchester, and you see the outpouring and the Don't Look Back in Anger song and everything there, and that's happening 2 streets away, and then the bombing was a street away, and you just, the real sense of loss in that city at that time. It's not made up. It's a genuine emotional thing, and
it gives me the goosebumps now, man. Like every time I think about the reaction, I just think, what a Manchester way of coming back, and you know, just the city is it brings me so much joy and happiness. But look, here's the problem with the word failure, Mark, is it doesn't sound sexy, you know. And so let's try and reimagine it, because you know, I think that one of your best endeavors, and I say one of your best, one of the most useful things that you ever did for me was starting Honest Coffee. Obviously the coffee shop that was right around the corner from FutureWorks, the film school I went to. And me and my classmates, you know, when we're working on our own crazy passion projects, we'd go and sit in Honest Coffee. And everything about that place inspired us to try something different. Even the business model of Honest Coffee was about giving profits away. And again, like, you know, as someone who thinks he's sort of new business, I used to sit there scratching my head, but also realizing that the value of this place was in what it makes me feel. And the reason why it was different to Costa or any other small cafe shop was because I knew your story, and I knew why you were doing it. And I knew that this business model, if it would have worked, would have actually been good for the community. So can you tell us a little bit more about the business model of Honest Coffee and why you decided to go down that route?
Yeah, so the first initial thing was that to use a creative space in Manchester was becoming more and more expensive because it was becoming gentrified, and I recognised that, and I was like, well, how do we solve that problem as a creative community? The second bit was that there was stories at the time that Starbucks weren't paying any tax, or very little tax, and there was a huge thing with a lot of, and it still happens now, but the corporations doing massive tax avoidance, and the government. Remember, we was in an age of austerity, and so this was around 2020. Sorry, 20. When did we do that project? 2015 or something like that. And so we were 5 years into austerity, and there was cuts everywhere. You know, councils being cuts, Shaw Start Centres being cuts, and Starbucks are like cutting everything. And I was like, well, if we could have a creative space that was free for creatives to use, and they could put events on, and they could do co-working was becoming a thing. I think WeWork was just about to happen. So it was around that time. So there was a cusp of this co-working thing happening. And like, we could do some co-working, but we'd make it free, so there isn't a monthly like fee to pay, and it's paid for by the coffee shop. And so obviously freelancers already use coffee shops to do their emailing and have meetings and stuff. And I was just like, well, okay, well, I don't want to profit from that. If we take the money that's made and it pays everyone that's in the shop, and then the surplus, we then can create these creative grants. And then everyone in the shop that uses the shop can apply for the creative grants. So it's simple. It becomes a circular economy. Although it didn't work. And the reason that it didn't work in hindsight, and bearing in mind this cost me about £40,000 in an experiment out of my own pocket. I had to then come up with another idea to pay for the idea that went wrong. Luckily, history of video games helped pay for the mistakes of Home of Honest Coffee. I was innovative enough to come up with something. But it didn't work because I didn't use 0-hour contracts. Now they're there for a reason, is that when you have got all your staff on 40 hours, they're on above living wage, because I was doing everything ethically good.
Mm-hmm.
There's no wiggle room when it goes wrong. So when it was going wrong, and the reason it went wrong is because there was a massive car park next to us that held 500 cars. So people would park up and walk into Manchester and get coffee or food from us. That closed, and the reason it closed is because they were going to build some apartments on it.
Mm.
So, and then there was an art studio and some other bits and bobs around that all closed and were turned into flats. And they had loads of workmen on stuff on there. And of course, when workmen are around, they don't want a artisan coffee and they don't want a avocado on toast. They want a full English breakfast and a mug of tea for the cheapest price that you can give them. And we weren't geared up for that. And neither was the footfall in the area there to enable us to keep paying 40-hour a week, 4 members of staff, £10 an hour. It was too much. And so literally, and I didn't have because it was coming up to Christmas, I didn't want to be Scrooge and sack or make the staff redundant. And so I was 3 months into it literally just saw the numbers going like that and like nothing. And it was literally, have to find the wages, found them, pay them out, found them, pay them out, have no money. What do we do? Sorry guys, we've got no jobs. And it's like, oh Mark, we hate you, it's Christmas. And I'm like, okay.
But then on top of that, there's also like sort of freak accidents. I think you had a flood at one point.
Yeah, we got broke into once. We had 2 floods because of the basement was below some water line. No, first one was a pipe flooded, so the United Utilities fresh water went in.
Oh.
So we got a claim. You know, we claimed for everything in the basement, everything ever. And then the second one was rainwater, because it naturally floods because of where it is, and that was happening around the time of it going south. So yeah. Actually, when it flooded the second time, it was the massive floods that happened in Boxing Day, when like Todmorden, where I lived, my house got flooded. So I had to move out of house. It was like a refugee. The same time the coffee shop also got flooded at the same time. So that was difficult.
But here's the thing, Mark. It's a great idea, and so obviously, you know, it didn't work because of the sort of reasons you've given. But do you think it ever could work that you could create a social, I mean, what I'd call a social enterprise for the creative community?
Yeah. So from those experiences, I'm not been jaded enough to not give up on the idea. I mean, I'm looking at taking that idea and applying it to creating cycle hubs across Manchester, because we need secure places to put our bikes and communities. Cycling community is cool. I'm part of the cycling community, and it's a cool sort of gang to hang out with, and a lot of cool business people and creatives and stuff in there as well. So it's good for networking and growing the business. The reason that we failed is because I was naive of how the world works. I thought that everybody was going to give us the opportunity I thought everyone was always going to come to the shop because they believed in what I was trying to do. Now, you went however many times you went, but we really needed you, Cameron. and 100 people like you to come every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Even in our down periods, and even if there was a lockdown like COVID-19, we would still need you to turn up.
Mm.
We had that at the start because we did it on Kickstarter, so we had funding from the fan base that future artists have been building up for whatever 6 years before that. So we got a little bit, but that was good for 2 weeks, and then we were into the world of, you know, the brickie wants a fried breakfast, and we couldn't supply that because we didn't do it. And they would walk out, and I would sit there and I would see customers walking in and walking out, and I'd ask them why, and they were like, well, you're not doing, everything's too fancy, or it's £1 more than Tesco's up the road for a sandwich. And I was like, oh, we need these because I'm paying for the staff, and I'm got all this and all these overheads and stuff. So it was naivety that everyone's going to support the idea. They're not. You see this on Brexit. 50% want it, 50% don't. Coffee shop, 50% just want something to eat, 50% are like, we love the idea, Mark, we'll support you, all that sort of thing. So, and we just didn't have the footfall. I went for the area that I could afford with the money that I had. Never do that. Save up some more to get the space that will work for your business. Right. I've been looking for a space for a year, and I had Kickstarter backers, and I was just worried about them. I was like worried about what they were saying, like what they were emailing me saying, you've taken our money, and I was like, I'm looking for you gave me $5,000. Like, I've got to build this thing out of $5,000, which is naivety again, that I didn't have the right capital to back my idea. So I didn't back my idea with enough capital. It was in the wrong place. My ethics were too high, and I gave myself no wiggle room when it came to it collapsing. And you know what the biggest mistake I made, Cam, before we probably move on to another subject, and I don't think anybody knows this, is that I thought I was being clever by signing a 10-year lease, and I didn't get it checked out by a property lawyer. And so the massive failure on this part, which could have completely wiped me out, was that the landlord had me in a 10-year bind, and I had no exit clauses within my contract. You have to put those in. So a lawyer would put them in for me. So the contract had no way of me getting out of it. And so I would plead to them and say, I don't want to give you the £4,000 a month for this shop. I have nothing in it. So there's no mark you need to pay. So for a year after the coffee shop closed down, I had to find £4,000 a month to pay for it. So I brought other operators in. I created the history of video games. I did whatever I could to create stuff in that space to basically pay off money to the landlord. The landlord eventually let me out of the contract after sending me a bill for £140,000, which was, you know, the 8 years left on the contract. And he said, look, this is what you owe, but we'll put it on the market, and if we get somebody to take the shop, then you're released from your contract. Luckily, 6 weeks later from this letter, £140,000 letter, they found somebody, and there's somebody in there now doing cosmetic surgery or something, you know, where they get lip.
Christ. Mark, I would have loved to have seen your face when you opened that letter.
Oh, it was an email, and I was in an art gallery in Edinburgh, and I was looking at some fancy art or, you know, some weird stuff that was up there, and I just opened this, and I'm like, well, I haven't got £140,000. So I don't know if I carried on my day, but it plays on your mind, you know.
Yeah. It's incredible though, because obviously, you know, adapt and overcome, you know, deviation from the norm is what you do. So you've got a space, you know, and I think I do feel kind of bad now because I could have always brought a few more friends with me to that space. However, it was just so useful for us as film students to just kind of be there. But moving on, you know, you have to sort of pay $4,000 a month. I mean, that's ridiculous that was even in your head every day when you went to bed, is that $4,000. Yeah. The history of video games was mad, mate. I've never walked into a place and had, you know, all of my old games consoles from, you know, the Nintendo Wii down to, you know, the N64, and then obviously the PS4 and all that. You just created a gaming space with both, you know, new and old games. Tell me a little bit more about the history of games, or the history of gaming, sorry.
So yeah, the History of Video Games event started out as a back of the beer mat idea that so I had the Great Northern Warehouse while we had the coffee shop. So I was able to service $4,000 a month because I had a very lucrative contract doing the marketing and events for a very big space in the middle of Manchester. and I was on a good retainer, so I didn't get any wages. The wages went straight to the coffee shop, and I had a team to pay and stuff, so I managed to service it that way. And we had to come up with ideas to go into this big Great Northern Warehouse space in Manchester. And one of the ideas I came up with was retro arcade. And this idea was about 5 years ago. And so I said to Carla, who was working with us at the time, I said, go find where we can get retro arcade machines from, because I think I've got an idea. I want to figure it out. She came back and she said, we can hire them from these places and things like that. And then I just sort of forgot about the idea because we had lots of other things going on, but it was an idea that we had. Then when the coffee shop went south, I needed an idea, and I remembered that one, and I was like, well, nostalgia's pretty cool, and I like video games, and they like stories, and I'm into video game culture. I'm like, if you do it right, you've actually got a storytelling world, and you've got all these amazing characters like Sonic and Mario, and you've got Outrun and Afterburner, and you've got a real rich history of technology and innovation, and video games culture, and it's not really catered for on the high street. And I was like, why is that? It's like, the video game industry is as big as the music and the film combined, plus then some. It's a massive, massive, massive industry. I'm like, why is no one doing anything in this field? And the reason is because I guess they don't understand it. I guess the money men don't understand what this is, because it comes from games developers, and it's a bit geeky, but it's not, because mobile gaming, everybody plays mobile games on their phones, and it's for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so we used the coffee shop, which was now empty, and I had no coffee or food in it, and it was just me. And we managed to work with collectors to get the video games, and we put them in the space. And like you said, we used all the space up, and we had loads of video games in there. And we just said, look, you pay £10, you get 3 hours, and you can play anything you want. And it's for all the family, so we aimed it at the family. We originally aimed it at kind of like geeks, like people that collect arcade machines and stuff. But then we realized that actually collectors are a really funny, they're a very close-knit bunch. If you're not a collector, you're kind of not allowed in the gang. And they also didn't want people to really play the machines. It was more about looking at the machines and collecting things. And so I was like, no, we need to aim at families. So it's people probably a little bit older than me that have got some kids that are like, this is what I had when I was a kid. Come and play this cool game, and get off Fortnite and come and play Mario 3 on the NES, and that's what started to happen. And then obviously with social media, you get to report that and talk with your community, and it builds and builds. So it started from the coffee shop, and then it moved to shopping centres, where we then began to solve the problem of how you bring families and young people using social media into the shopping centre, so that the shopping centre could then say, go to Subway, go to Primark, and we built up, thousands of people have been to these events, and it's actually now a cornerstone of what future artists do, or was, until COVID-19 came along, and now paid for attractions are currently no.
But and that's a real shame, right? Because I mean, just simply bringing people together. I mean, I remember multiple times coming in and just being amazed by the fact that you've got all these people here sharing the same passion. And I think that's probably what you've always stood out to me for, is you're very good at bringing together people around subjects they really, really love. So obviously, you got into the gaming side of things. You started realizing that this industry was just 10 times bigger than what you were kind of brought up to think. I didn't even think the video game industry was that special, but obviously it is. You then moved into sort of future technology, so like AR, VR, AR. I mean, this is stuff that I don't think was really even that big at the time. You were really trying to put it in the hands of normal people. I think it was the first time I ever tried VR. Was at the what was the name of that event?
So we did the history of video games, and that went well. And then we took that to Edinburgh, to Ocean Terminal, and it ran there. And then so the coffee shop was empty again. There's a recurring theme here. And so I could use it as my platform to say what would be the future of video games. And so I was doing things in very early VR about 4 years ago with the Oculus headsets and the HTC Vives and stuff. And the PlayStation 4 had just brought the headset out. But this technology is very expensive, and if they want storytellers and creatives to to get into it and to figure out how to use it. Again, I'm using that cooperative model, is to say, well, if a bunch of creatives want to use this kit, let's share the kit and let's all learn together on this new thing. And so that's what the future of video games was part of that. And then there was also an immersive arts lab that we ran out of a university. And those two things combined informed me enough that last year I pitched in and I've been given a PhD with a scholarship on immersive arts and VR because of those two things that I learned there at Liverpool John Moores University, where I'm doing it now. We wanted to learn from the audience. So it was like, well, how are people going to react? Like when you put something on your head, and is there a future in this? So we did a 1 month prototype, which you did a vlog for, I think, and you came down and visited. And that's how that began, because we had a space and we needed to experiment with the community. And I wanted a new creative journey. I think I was giving the coffee shop back. I knew there was an end to that journey, and I wanted to know what I was going to be doing next. And it's storytelling in a digital world. So we're now probably moving into a world of the metaverse and having almost all, like 60% of our lives online and 40% in the real world. And COVID sped this up, is that actually before it was probably like 40% online and 60% offline. So I knew that was coming, because you could just see the natural play of things, really. But now you've got Generation Z, and I'm a millennial, or just about a millennial, but Gen Z, who's underneath us, are literally all consumed by digital culture. And so they'll be discovering everything through the cloud and this digital universe out there, using laptops, tablets, phones, VR as their way in.
But I think the thing that really interested me when I came and I shot the vlog about, the future of AR, VR, and you had in the coffee shop the Star Wars game set up, and I remember playing that, and I know I'm an emotional person, Mark. So like yourself, I only need a few things to go right for me to believe that I am actually a Jedi. So that was like a really massive wake-up call for me. And obviously I filmed it, made the blog about it. And then I went to the workshop. And what really, really surprised me was the people at the workshop, were quite clearly into gaming, and they were quite clearly, interested in it. But there wasn't an overwhelming sense of like, what we're doing here today is like the future. And I look back at this vlog now and I think like, wow, like Mark has always been just a bit before his time. Like almost too much before your time.
Oh no, I'm well aware of this in a weird way. Not like I actually slow myself down now, because I'm sometimes, if I'm trying to commercialize an idea, I'm 2 years way ahead, and so I'll go bankrupt trying to convince people over 2 years, because I've done this maybe 4 or 5 times. So I'm actually keenly aware that I have ideas right now that will not come to fruition for 5 years, and I just need to wait and work on stuff and do other things while I'm waiting for things to catch up. So no, I'm weirdly aware of that sometimes it's all about timing, and sometimes my timing is way off, and that's a business lesson, is that you see that through the history of most technological things, is you can only run as fast as the consumer can keep up with you.
Interesting, which makes it really tough for entrepreneurs like yourself, who are trying to kickstart the sort of next gen. I mean, talking about gens, Lost Generations, that was a feature film you shot, and may I say, probably again before its time. Tell us about the sort of the themes of that feature film, because I think that's probably very relevant today.
Yeah, I watched it back a few weeks ago because I was on lockdown, so I was looking through archive stuff, and yeah, it's very relevant. But that's how I was looking at the future could be, is that, so The Lost Generation is about a fictional game show which is controlled by the government, and it's like everybody watches this game show, and so it's a little bit like Hunger Games. And our lead character, SJ, is sort of framed for a crime she didn't commit, but by committing that crime, it's gonna help the higher ups and the government to succeed on what they want to do. And the banks are involved, major corporations are being greedy and are involved, and there's these 2 producers that are sort of the puppets, controlling everything, but ultimately they are also controlled. And it's about guess it's about fake news and the narratives of the time and all this sort of stuff. But it was made 8 years ago and shot because I wanted to shoot. I always wanted to be a film director. I big up to George Lucas and Disney and these innovators that I look up to. And the consumer cameras, the 550Ds and the 5Ds were coming out, and they looked quite cinematic. You could film on them, and I was like, well, let's just borrow those off people that have got them, pay them to, a day rate to shoot a film. And we shot Lost Generation in 11 days, but we shot it over like 2.5 years on weekends. And so I constructed the story that it could be done on that duration because we didn't have money available to pay people, so we had to keep waiting or do crowdfunding to do it. But eventually we did a good enough job, and it was picked up by a distributor. It was released on DVD. It was on Love Film. It's on Amazon Prime now. It's been sold multiple times to different distributors. I get a royalty check from it, which is very, very small. And the film ultimately cost £10,000 to make using the Robert Rodriguez Film School technique. And I got a loan from Nationwide for garden furniture to make the film. And ultimately, I just needed to put my money where my mouth was, and obviously, some credit cards and stuff. And we made it, and it's out there, and it's on a disc that nobody can put in anything now because nobody uses that. But the distributor has sold it onto Q Media, who I think have just gone bust, and that's been sold onto somebody else. And it sits on Amazon Prime and on iTunes. But the best thing for me is when I ordered it myself on Love Film, and it got delivered to my house. And I took a photograph. I think it's on my Instagram. And we saw it in HMV on the shelves. And there's a YouTube video with that. For me, that was a boyhood dream come true. At 31, I'd made my feature film. I did it my way using techniques that Robert Rodriguez and Lucas said to do. They were right. I did it. And it got an audience. And ultimately, that went on. It got pirated, got seen 1 million times on all the streaming sites, and enabled me to do another project called Portal, which was because we took the chance and we got to do that film.
So having it pirated, were you bothered by that? Because I imagine some filmmakers don't like that, but that was good for you, right?
Yeah, because I knew that was like the audience saying we like it. Because I didn't have a marketing budget, I had like a few thousand people on Twitter and a few thousand people on Facebook, and it's like, go buy my film from HMV. And we're like, what's that film, Mark? Oh, it's shot for £10,000. We're not going to buy it. And like, it's really good. So an audience, somebody actually brought it. They had to purchase it from somewhere and then go through the trouble of wanting to pirate it. And we found the original website of where it had been hosted and the artwork they put on. And what we realized is our YouTube views for our trailer shot up from like 500 to like 8,000 in a period of 2 weeks. And it's because they put that video on their on that forum, and then other people pirate it and put it on other websites, and they use this. It's like a kit of instant pirate kit. So we found the source, and then we were like, well, it's now on. I think I found it on 20 sites at least, because you go on them and they got all these weird pop-ups. So I stopped looking for a while. But then my mate, who's a Sparky, one of my best friends, he was like, your film's on the front page of this illegal plugin that you put in the back of the TV. It's on this carousel, like a Netflix carousel. Like, it's next to big films, and there's your film. And I'm like, well, how many views has it had? And he says it's had 25,000 views, and it's got a 7 or 8 star rating out of 10. And I'm like, whoa. And so I messaged him 2 months later and said, how many views have I got on that illegal Netflix? And he went, well, it's like 120,000 views now, and your rating's like 7 out of 10. And I'm like, that's cool.
Sweet. And it's a cult classic, it really is.
If more press reported on it, because it was never really picked up by the press, you would say it's a cult classic, but nobody really knows.
It's tough, man, because I think the issue with it is it is so real. Like you've obviously taken, the experience that you've had and the understanding of your worldview and said, I'm going to tell this story. And this is the way I see the world. And you're not wrong, Mark. The way that corporations and globalists are sort of leading the world of gender is absolutely true. and yet you're not seeing movies about this, you know. So I doubt you'd ever get a studio to commission a movie about the types of themes that Lost Generations was about. And dude, that again comes back down to this Manchester sort of feeling of like, I'm going to tell the truth in the way I want to tell it, regardless of whether you think you're going to show it in your cinema or not. And there you go. Technology says, thank you, we'll take that, and we'll just put it around the world, million views, and you know, wonderful.
I mean, things only go viral if you give the audience the freedom to share it, and also that they want to share it, because they've got to put some work into even if it's just pressing 2 buttons to send a share. They've got to make a decision. And so hopefully the way that we've built Future Artists up over the past 10 years is to enable people that we want them to make that decision and help them out how to do that. And you've got to have genuine conversations to do that, because no one's going to share a half-baked idea or something they're not equally passionate about. So hopefully we're connecting with people.
There was a lot of really relevant themes, particularly around like surveillance. And I think that was probably a time when we were all starting to realize, maybe around sort of Edward Snowden days, and we just realized that we were being watched 24/7. We realized that we were part of someone else's game. And I think that's why it had such, such good feedback from people. So moving on now, obviously, I think that was a long time ago. Tell me a little bit more about the current project. So you've got Skank, right? That's happening in Paris Fringe.
Yeah. So we've been quite successful with History of Video Games. We've paid off all the debt, and so we started to get a surplus of capital. And so the original idea was always to support artists with grants and to invest in them, and to take all our experience, which my experience is 15, 20 years working in theatre and film, and then the collective around us have all got different experiences, to be able to build a product or to go into our community. And so I sort of stumbled across this amazing artist called Clementine Hargroves, or Clem. And Clem she's got this one-woman show. It's called Skank, and it's a comedy drama. She does everything on stage, and it's just a table and a chair, but she brings this world alive, and it's won loads of critical acclaim. Like, the reviews are amazing. They call her a tour de force. She's really funny, she's witty, she's really warm with it, and she's a really nice person to work with. And so I saw a poster for it, and I contacted her, and there was a big sort of buzz about Fleabag at the time, and I was like, I would love to find a Fleabag-esque piece of work or create something. I had a few ideas, but I was like, well, I'm not female. But I could produce with somebody, I could bring all my skills to somebody. And so I found Clem's work, and I asked her to come in for a meeting. We met at home in Manchester and had a pizza and a glass of wine, and just said, like, if I was to give suggestions and work with you and actually collaborate with you, would you listen to me, or do you just like to do your own thing? She's like, no, I'll be open up for chatting and to collaborating. And I didn't know who she was. And so basically we had a creative courtship for like 3 months, trying to figure out how to work together. And then I said, look, we'll take a risk, and we'll put on Skank in the King's Arms in Manchester, which is a small theatre pub. It holds about 50 people, and we were given a slot for like 30 quid a night and some rehearsal space as part of a kind of best of the Manchester Fringe, because she came like third best in this Fringe thing in last year. But it's January, so no one's going to turn up. So the reason they give the slots for this theatre is because nobody's going to turn up. So it's just to maybe sell a few pints. So, but they didn't realise they were getting future artists involved. And so what we did with Skank and what we did with Clem was we sold out all of our dates in January, and we were only meant to have 2 dates. And this other theatre company dropped out, and I said, I'll have those 2 dates, so we've got 4 dates to run this, because in theatre you need it to bed down and to find its feet. And I've never worked with Clem, so I wanted more dates to work with. Luckily that we did, because we sold out the entire run, and it was like the 14th of January, when no one's got no money, it's cold and rainy, and it was chucking it down with rain, and people came to see this show. Off the back of that, we managed to get into Vaults Festival, which is like the Edinburgh Festival of London. It's a huge thing. Lynn Gardner, who's the major arts critic for theatre in The Guardian, she's contacting us, and she might be doing an article on us. The Brighton Fringe, we got into that to do 4 dates at 5. They gave us 4, and then they gave us 5. But obviously that was in May, and COVID-19 meant that we couldn't do it. So we're booked on for next year. And then Paris Fringe Festival got in touch and said, do you want to do Paris? But obviously COVID's about, we still want to do our festival because we've got thousands of people that would normally come, but we're going to do an online festival, but we're going to innovate with our online. So we're not just going to film a show, we want to do some different stuff. And I said to Clem, I said, we're building Skank out to be like a story world. So there were like graphic novel elements, there's online, the way we talk online is in character. We've got funny videos, there's obviously the show that sold out and people come to. And I said, well, what can we put into Paris? What can we innovate with streaming theatre, and what can we create in the story world to do this? And so Clem went away and she created, it's called Skank, a brand new mess, because we always refer to it as Skank, a self-made mess. It's about the character sort of, overcoming obstacles in life. So she's created, I think, a 40-minute hybrid live performance, pre-teleplay created performance, some social media stuff that I'm doing. And this is going to be our performance at the Paris Fringe. So it's very innovative and very future artist and very new. But it's kind of not new to us, because all I've done is taken elements from the last 10 years and placed them around this piece of work.
Are you telling me that finally you're at the right time in history, Mark?
Well, I had to create a COVID-19 lockdown situation for me to be able to show what transmedia is, which is a term back in the day, which is now cross-platform, which is now whatever they call it now, which is now just how it is, isn't it? So
incredible. And of course, there's a lot of people, a lot of businesses in the world that are struggling to grasp what this digital transformation is. And there's a lot of people I'm sure you're working with who are so thankful to have you and your experiences in their life. Because I used to feel a little bit a bit of hatred towards the older generation whenever I used to tell them that digital was the way forward, and now I just feel a bit sorry for them. So it's good that people like you exist, and you're able to go to the creatives and go to the technical people and be like, guys, look, I've done this before. I've seen it in a dream. I know that this is actually going to work. And of course, the only barriers now is this sort of technology. Is the ability. What's funny? I live in a warehouse in North London with 20 people who hate 5G. I can't wait to get faster internet.
I can't wait for 5G. I just brought a VW camper van, a T5. I've become one of those people. And I can't wait to have my little office in anywhere with 5G connection, which will be faster than my home broadband, and I get to go kayaking for lunch and then come back and do whatever digital stuff. If I'm doing lockdown and if this is the new normal, I hate that word, but this is the new normal, then I'm going to have it on my terms. So I'll be working at my T5 and driving about and doing really good work, but on my terms, because I don't want to work from home, like as in home. There needs to be a separation. So I need to invent a new separation, and that's part of my mix I need for myself, mental health and all that kind of stuff. So.
How has it been for you in lockdown? What's your situation like?
So I'll come up with. I was thinking about this morning. I would come up with ideas just for something to do, and I would get the whiteboard out and I'd do this. So I've done lockdown on my own, and I live in a new place because I came to West Kirby to do my PhD in Liverpool. So I moved about 9 months ago to a new place, and so don't really know anybody, and so I can't go on social distance walks or anything. So everything's been by Zoom or a phone call, or I wrote letters to my grandparents because they can't really hear on the phone and stuff. So I, letter writing.
Horses for courses, right?
Yeah, and they love the letters, so it works for everybody. Just trying to keep myself busy by doing that. I still had clients, like I'm producing for the BBC, and so I put that on hiatus because we couldn't fabricate some of the stuff. It's like theatre and VR that we're doing for new creatives at the BBC. And so I said to my executive producer, I said, look, instead of just burning through cash trying to solve problems, the smart thing to do is just to stop. And we just place it like that, and I'll pick it back up in 2 months' time which is quite daring when I've never. This is my first producing contract as a new media creative for the BBC and in charge of a production. And I went, we've only got this much budget, and if we burn through it, we haven't got any more. So let's just stop and wait. Time becomes our friend, and everybody trusted me on that. And now we're back up in production. We've got a virtual studio thing going off, and the world's coming back alive.
Incredible.
So
You made
that.
a decision to hold on a project.
Huh?
You actually made the decision to put a hold on a project instead of diving into it and just seeing it happen.
That's comes from experience, I think. So knowing that time is your friend, that you don't need to be running through every single door. You don't need to take every opportunity that comes for you, because as you know, as your career has got bigger, you have 10 opportunities in front of you, but really you can only do one of them very well, maybe two. And so you have to figure out what that one's going to lead to if you do it. And so you have to figure that one out. So that's why I know that getting a T5 and working from a van is fine. I know that selling the BBC, they need to hold for a little bit, is fine. I know that working with Skank, we didn't get into Brighton, and Clem was very sad, and I had to sort of virtually nurture her through that process because she was very upset about it. And then Paris came along, and then I had to virtually pick her up and say, you've got an opportunity to create now and to show the world what you can do. And this has all been from here. I've not left. And so that has shown me that actually I probably have good communication skills, and I have the ability to put across what I want to say succinctly enough that people trust me and things like that, which is probably why we're talking on this vlogcast. And so that's all important, and they're life lessons. If anything that your listeners are still watching this, is that after 10 years or 11 years of running my own business, and then the bit before, which was me learning as a creative, was probably 20 years, I'm probably now mastering what I'm meant to be doing. I can get very frustrated with myself because I'm trapped in these four walls. But the last 2-3 months has taught me that actually the skills that I have are within me, and I use this technology to get it out there and to do it. And so that's what I'm learning now is, can I make the company as big as I want it to be from the confines of a lockdown jail cell?
Absolutely.
We will see, I guess. We will see.
Well, if there was anyone that was going to, if I was ever going to, I was about to say open a newspaper then and see a face, if I was ever going to scroll through social and find out that someone's won a prize for some kind of communications and creative innovation, it would be you, Mark. And I think that's why every time that we talk, and you've been such an inspiration throughout my whole career, and just your ability to be honest and give away lots and lots of value without asking for anything back, I think is what makes me really want to find a project to work together on and actually work with you, because I think you're a bloody good human being. So just lastly, Mark, we always talk about sort of books and inspirations that we find. What are you reading at the moment, or what could you possibly suggest to my audience, mostly creative? My mum and dad also watch this, but they don't read. So, just my creative audience. Got any suggestions?
Yeah, so I'm dyslexic, like yourself. So I can read, but I can only do about 10 pages, and I think my eyes just start to struggle and stuff like that. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks on Audible, and a few I've picked up from your podcasts. And so ones that you need to, if you had, let's do 3, and you can help me with this one. So, the YouTube tuber one that was
Streampunks.
Definitely audio that one, or read Streampunks, because that basically shows you where YouTube was, where it came to, and where it's going, and what great people who use video and understand community and get that two-way dialogue going, but through video and YouTube are doing. I learned so much from that book, and I thought I knew like the platform and stuff like that, but I don't use YouTube enough, and that's now becoming my friend. And I did some paid placements on YouTube, and History of Video Games and Skank have like skyrocketed out, 100,000 views, and genuine views. You can see that people are watching the whole video, but you just need to know how to one, how to edit the video, and then one, how to get it to the community. And Streampunk's helped me do that.
Amazing.
The second one is, I'm just looking at it here because I've got my laptop stacked up on some books. And so the Gen Z Effect, which is by Thomas Kupelos and Dan Kelsden. I was listening to the audiobook, but the audiobook was so good because I'm doing my PhD about Gen Z and immersive music industry. And the Gen Z Effect is a brilliant book because it explains that Generation Z is normally a tagline given by the media industry to say what that sort of age group is. But what their argument is that Gen Z is anybody that uses this new philosophy of what we're doing now, of embracing change and then taking it into your life and being digital first. And the Gen Z Effect is actually Gen Z are doing that all the time, and you can learn from them. So we talked about reverse mentoring, where traditional mentorship is maybe an older person is teaching a younger person an apprenticeship. But actually, reverse mentoring is that young people, because of how they use technology, can teach an older person more so than they can. And so there's been this flip round thing happening, and that's part of the Gen Z Effect. And this book outlines all that. And I'm sure you can put some links around this to help people find it. And then the third one, again, is what my books are stacked up on, is a book by Graham Hancock. So it's nothing to do with technology and social media. It's actually Graham Hancock. It's called Before America, I think. And I've followed Graham's work since the mid-90s when I was like a student of 15, a teenager. And his books are about like lost civilizations. And it's about our history as humanity is actually incomplete or wrong, he thinks, and he keeps finding things, and this is now documented by people that there was a comet that struck the Earth around 12,000 BC and sort of wiped out whatever human population was there, which would only be a few million people around the world. There's a massive a meteor strike, and it happened on the ice sheets, and it created the flood myths and things like that. And so they're now finding things all around the world that actually say that what Graham has been saying for about 25 years is actually true. And he's researching what this civilization could be like and what we could learn from it. And he says that basically humanity at the moment has got a collective amnesia and doesn't understand its past. And by not understanding our past, which you can see with the Black Lives Matter protests, we are in denial of what our past and what the British Empire was built upon, and we don't talk about it in our history lessons and stuff, and that doesn't make us very good people. We don't learn from stuff, and so by not understanding our ancient past, what mistakes are we making now? And that's a book that I'm reading. So and Graham on Audible, on Amazon Audible, is a great narrator, and he narrates his own books. He's engaging, and it's very interesting. So it's scientific, very interesting. So an eclectic reading list for you there.
Yeah, I really like it because as much as we want to learn more about social media, you can never stop learning about this sort of stuff. It changes all the time, and we're filmmakers, so we naturally are inclined to read them. But the history of people, like just psychology of people, understanding us humans, is such a fascinating subject because you kind of see it everywhere. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, I find myself kind of as a knee-jerk reaction just supporting it and just saying yes, because of the fact that slavery existed and still exists to some degree today, you instantly want to just kind of support that no matter what the details or and yet that's just not always right. And I guess my biggest I've been shamed in the last few days for not attending protests. Most of my friends are very liberal people. When they asked me to come and vlog about the Black Lives Matter protests, and it's tough because we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I'm a bit confused because I don't really want to, I'm not racist, right? How many times does someone have to say they're not racist and then obviously go and prove that they're not by going and marching in a protest during a pandemic?
You're allowed to have a choice whether you go or not. I mean, that's part of actually the conversation of you shouldn't suddenly say, well, he didn't go, so therefore he is this, he is bad, he is whatever. It's actually, well, actually, I've got a choice to do how I support things or how I do things. And you only have to look at Michael Jordan. I watched the Last Dance documentary on Netflix, and he, as a black basketball player that was probably the best in the world, you know, in the 90s, he was like, are you going to support this black Democrat that is up against a racist, and we need your support? And he's like, I don't want to get involved in politics. And his reasoning is for whatever reasons he had. But then fast forward to the present day, he's like, I'm giving 100 million to this situation now, and I'm out there to do what I need to do. And he was a prominent person, and he decided to not support that cause back then, and now supports it now. That's fine. We all have a choice. God, if we didn't have a choice, imagine the world, Cam.
Well, I mean, I don't know, man. This is what I'm kind of scared of it, because, you know, as much as I appreciate that history is always written by the winners. You know, obviously you get, you know, you're getting people wanting to, you know, history is just simmering to the surface now. The true history, knowing
this is great, because this with the statues in Bristol, that has opened up a conversation now where people are going like, who's that person I've walked past in bronze for the past 50 years and I've never even looked at the description? It's just, I go around it in the town centre or something. And people are now researching and realising that, for example, when the slaves were all freed by the British government, they weren't freed. Like, the owners didn't go, free, run free. It was like, that's our property and you need to buy our property from us. And what you're going to do with that property is completely up to you, but you need to buy it from us. And there's a great, I can't remember the name of it. There was a documentary on BBC about 2 or 3 years ago, and they looked into that income tax had to be created because it was almost like the biggest bailout in history to free all the slaves. It cost billions of pounds in today's money, which back then there was no, they're only collecting taxes for certain things. So they had to invent the income tax to tax us all individuals so that they could pay off the slave owners who were corporations who said, you can have our property, but you need to buy it. And so they did audits and they came up with their own price for how much everybody was worth. People, how much people were worth, children to adults to men. And they wrote down on a ledger, and then they sent the ledger. So this was the first time that then the government had to create an administration to handle all these ledgers that were coming in. You know, the entire infrastructure had to be created. So how much are you asking for, Mr. Slave Owner? Oh, like £4,000, which is like £100,000 in today's money, whatever. Okay. And they didn't go and check it. They just said, yeah, we agree with that. Right, pay them the money. So they paid them the money. And then the slaves are like, well, we can't have the slaves yet because we've still got plantations to pick, but we'll phase it out. So they invented a word called phasing it out. And to pay for all that, they had to create income tax. And then they freed everybody. And they didn't give them any lands or assets. They just went, right, you're free now. Okay. Do you want to work? Yeah, we want to work for you. So some slaves didn't even want to be freed because they didn't have anything else to go to. So it was a complete, utter mess. And if you go back to it, this was people doing it to people. White people doing it to Africans, but also there's slave trade across Asia, and other people were doing it to each other. It's a huge mess. And the money this is the thing that will eventually probably come out if they watch these documentaries, is the money that was paid to free the slaves went to a certain 1% kind of people. And they then invested and created new industries like insurance. They created the railroads. They invested in oil wells. So then all that wealth that we gave them in a bailout went to all these new industries that then grew and became these billion-pound titans, which was funded by they invested in something else that they could exploit us from. So, and
inevitably they then rehired those slaves on incredibly low and unfavourable terms to just carry on the labour. There's a fascinating documentary called 13th on Netflix at the moment about how the American slavery never really went away. And this is the thing, Mark. So I mean, there's a lot of statues erected all around the world of people that are now known to be not so nice people. my question is what are we going to do about it? You know, do we want to erase that part of history, or do we want to say as a community we don't want that there anymore? I mean, I saw, you know, on Winston Churchill's statue, you know, in the city, that it's, you know, people want it removed, and I'm like, yeah, I get that, but like my granddad was racist. Like, I love my granddad, but like some of the words he used to say when I was a boy, I was a bit like, wow, how bad is that? So I don't know, where do we stop? Where does this line get drawn?
I think the actions in Bristol were kind of correct for the, you know, what that group of people did, and I thought that action was very inspiring because you can see it's rippled across the world. So that's actually started another movement, which is actually people thinking and discussing history, which is great because I love history and I love that people are now engaged with their own past. I think if you just sort of, to use a phrase of whitewashing history, is the wrong thing. So taking the statue down secretly in the middle of the night and hiding it, and then going, no statue here, don't have to worry about it. I think that's wrong. I think what needs to be looked at is that these statues do represent something, and they represent a way of getting into a story. And so perhaps gather them all up, like from all across the country, and put them in a space like the Liverpool Slavery Museum, or in a designated space where we maybe say sorry, like the Holocaust memorial in Berlin, which is like lots of concrete slabs, and you walk through it, and it represents the millions of Jews that died under Hitler. That's the kind of memorial that needs to be built, so that we can have the statues of the people that traded these people, and a representation in bronze or some sort of art that represents the millions of slaves that were sold and moved around in this triangulation of selling cotton, arms, and human capital, and show it in a representation through art, and say, this is what happened, and we're disgusted by it. We want you to engage in a conversation, and we'll engage you in a conversation, and this is a space to do that conversation. I think that's what we need, but we've kind of, everybody's a philanthropist, and it's like, where'd you get that money from? Oh, I sold slaves. It's like, that's bad. Oh yeah, but I've just built a college. That's good. You're okay. What?
Yeah, it's
like,
tough.
It's like, okay, slow down. Okay, you gave money to the city, and nobody really questioned it back then, but we're in times now where we always question where money comes from, because you have to do that. You know, Russian oligarchs, they're buying up football clubs or whatever it is, but we ask them where they got their money from, and no, you can't buy the football club, Mr. Russian oligarch, because that's blood money, or you stole it, or whatever. We now need to probably engage ourselves in a national conversation, which I think is starting to happen. Sadiq Khan in London doing a great job. He got in there with that conversation. They're looking at all the statues. And then I think we need to have a national conversation at Prime Minister level. Is that possible?
Oh, Boris.
Boris. And they need to say, well, I think you need a national memorial or something. I think you need to face up to our past. And all those that profited from it then need to make a decision whether they fund that, and be philanthropists and all that sort of stuff, or whether they turn the back and go. And I think then we'll know who turns the back of the ones you don't want to be involved in, and those that want to say sorry are saying sorry. And it's a really complex subject. It can't be decided on Twitter. It can't be decided on Facebook. It's a conversation that'll take many, many conversations to have, and it'll take years to figure out. But at least it started, because people of Bristol took action. And I hope that if the police do prosecute, that the people of Bristol will rally around and crowdfund and make sure that those people are looked after, because they were the ones that went to break the chains in the 21st century that were still there. We just didn't know that they were there. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that's the power of what we have now in social media and storytelling and understanding, is that we now have this global conversation. And you can't escape it, because we're all locked down and we're all looking at our phones, and it's constantly on there. So
this is the problem though, Mark, though, is that, like, I feel like the re-education program that we need is something that needs to be taught in schools, and on the basis that our schools haven't changed their curriculum for hundreds of years, you're a bit like, Jesus, when are we actually going to get the real story about slavery? When are we really going to find out the truth? And I think the really tough thing is knowing that it was legal. It was perfectly legal to own human beings and get them to work. So, you know, we're
But it's
not
by
looking at...
royal decree as well. Like the royal decree is like, that's why the East India Company had to get the royal. They have to pay the taxes. All went to the Queen, the King, Queen. I mean, us peasants should revolt against that. You
I
know,
think the Queen needs to come out and say
she needs
something.
to say, like, you know, how do you think they build these massive royal gold? What do you think funds that?
It's so bad, isn't it, man? It's so
Actors and things.
sinister.
It's like it's so we see bits, and it's like, actually look at the big picture. It used to be the British Empire went and did a lot of bad shit, but it's
Lots and
actually
lots.
the slavery element is a small element of a much bigger atrocity.
Hmm.
And this, I think our generation and Gen Z are the ones that are going to put those right. Because eventually eventually like Trump and Boris are going to die. Just time we'll see them off.
Mm.
And so they'll both of the generation that's coming up that are more maybe we're in a period of enlightenment, are more enlightened, and we'll say, not on our watch. We're going to change things.
I don't know, mate. I love your optimism, but like I feel like a left-right lefty right now, because I change my mind on things whenever I see new
But that's
information
fine,
presented.
Cameron. That's important to do that, because that's actually more of a centrist approach. Because it's either hard left or hard right, and it's actually sensible down the middle. Listen to everybody and do that.
Sensible, central, sensible, central. Is that come from that word? It
I,
sounds like it should have.
I don't know. It's just like, and to go slow and steady. You know, like I said, slow. Just take your time. Everyone's like, fire this off, fire this, fire. It's like, whoa, slow down. Like, let's. What's the end goal? And let's work towards it. It's like a lot of fires going off everywhere. So.
But do you not see? I mean, with, you know, obviously the lost generations and you're being from up north, the, you know, the globalist agenda is what kind of scares me the most. The idea that, you know, whilst we're all busy fighting the very obvious fight, which is that, you know, police corruption, or even just you know, Black Lives Matter movement is huge. But what about the other things that we don't hear about? You know, secret deals that actually long term put countries in, you know, terrible position. The things that isn't black and white for humans to understand and to go and regurgitate are the things that I personally think we should be talking about, that aren't sexy at all. You know, and then you kind of think, well, I don't agree with what the current zeitgeist is thinking is the problem. You know, I think that we've never been in a better time to deal with the, you know, to give more equality to everyone. But I don't necessarily think that the world is equal. And I think that those who are in power and control it are much more aware of the fact that you can fight amongst yourselves as much as you want. But the reality is that you never actually understand what's really going on. And I think from my point of view, it seems like fruitless if we don't just say, you know, MPs should be working for us and us alone, shouldn't have any, you know, interests in these companies. Oh, wait, you have to talk to these companies. All right, well, then you should have a conversation. Oh, wait, suddenly now you're having a conversation with a corporation. You are going into their world. And it's so goddamn confusing. And I would love it if one protest could make us all be nice and fair. But that's not the problem I want to address. The problem I want to address, I don't think I've found anyone who really has got a good idea for it, because by the time you get to the position of power, you're kind of okay with it. You're like, all right, cool. I've earned the right to be here now. What do you think about that?
That's a big question there, Cam. I mean, there's loads in that. But I think what you need is, to follow anybody, you need a leader, and you need a figurehead that's recognised, so you can say, well, that's who I want to get behind for that particular movement. Jeremy Corbyn was a very good one for the left.
But
Like
where
the
did
hard
he
right.
go? They just like erased him. It was like, you know,
Well, this is the narrative of the media, isn't it? Is like they squashed him down and they won, and then they're like, well, there's no monetary value in doing that anymore. So the media now move on to the next thing.
didn't even say goodbye.
Yeah, it just sort of went. So I don't vote for the Labour Party. I'm green. I'm like Team Caroline Lucas, you know, all that sort of thing. But I had massive respect for what he was trying to do. But at the election, he offered absolutely everything, and all Boris was saying was, build a wall or whatever he was doing, whatever phrase well, he just learned from Trump that you just say one thing repeatedly and that'll get you in power. So and also the media wasn't with Jeremy Corbyn, but I think what you're talking about is this globalized agenda, like the Bilderberg group kind of stuff, like this, the government behind the government. Now, there are obviously so many companies that control the world, and there are so many, we've still got the royal family here, and that lineage goes back 1,000 years, and then before that it goes back even further and stuff, and the way that the Europe was put together, and the real reasons we fought World War One was because it was basically a battle between royal families, and we had to fight for king and country. World War Two was different. That was about fascism. But it's this huge complex problem, and I guess what you're saying is, how does Cam solve that? And it's like, no, don't. It's too hard. It's too hard. Like, you literally would keep yourself awake at night, because when I was making things like Lost Gen, and I was probably, if you went back into my early Facebook posts, it was all about, I got this opinion and this is what I think it is. I realized that none of that really matters, because no one's really listening to me ever. Even my friends, even people, my colleagues that are close to me are probably not listening to me or watching what I'm doing. And so you need that big figurehead that comes out and says, we're all going to watch this now, and we're all going to learn from this now, which is what Gandhi did really well. It's what Trump does really well, unfortunately, because he uses Twitter very, very well. He's got 82 million followers, which, because of his position of power, is amplified down a funnel to everybody, and we see it on BBC News. He knows what he's doing. Even when he does stuff that's mistakes, I don't sometimes think they're mistakes. He just knows that they'll report on him, and as long as he's in the news cycle 24/7, he's winning. As soon as Twitter delete him, that's takes one intern to delete that account. Mm-hmm. That's all it takes to wipe him out.
But isn't that interesting? Because also, with the idea of corporations being, these soulless entities, well, they're not. They have faces, and you know what the face of Facebook looks like. You know what the face of Twitter looks like. And I don't know whether this is good communications and marketing from Twitter, but I trust Twitter more than I trust Facebook. And isn't that funny? Like, all it took was for Twitter CEO to say a few nice things for us to go, oh yeah, Twitter's like the decentralized, like, the place where we want to be. And it's like,
no,
making money.
Which it totally isn't, because I think you might have read the Disney Michael Eisner, is it, book. Disney were going to buy Twitter, and Twitter were going to sell to Disney. So like they're all about the money. But then Disney were like, well, you've got all this sort of problem with porn, you've got this problem with comments that are maybe not with the Disney brand. I don't think we can buy you, because Disney wanted a social media company and they couldn't afford Facebook, and Twitter was just sort of in their prices. So Twitter is just a brand like anything else. It does its little text message tweets, and we read into it what we want, and we have an opinion, and it gives us a platform to have an opinion with people we would never meet. So our community can be whatever we want it to be, and I can hang out with people on Twitter who I'd never meet in real life. I'm chatting to Jed McHugh, who does Line of Duty at the moment. Line of Duty, not Call of Duty. Yeah. And did The Bodyguard, and I love all that work. And I'm engaged in with Skank, and I'm like, obviously that's for business means, but I can do that from my phone, on my sofa. I don't have to go to a networking thing in London or something. So has its benefits, but also what we saw in the early days of the internet was early adopters, tech heads, cyberpunks, hackers using that space. Then you kind of teenagers and mum and dad start using it, and then world leaders and politicians and corporations start using it, and then so it loses its innocence and becomes a mirror to what the real world actually is, which is very, very complex. It's not black and white, even in a literal sense. It is very, very complex, and people use it for their own agendas. And if you have enough money, as you know, with marketing, when you pump money into Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, that's when you get the eyeballs. So if you've got £1 billion, you can say whatever you want on media. You don't need a national secret agenda. You just need to pay for the ads.
It's crazy, isn't it? I think they said that Trump spent around $100 million on Facebook ads during his election. You think, you know, how does anyone think that democracy is real these days?
Well,
Look,
Facebook isn't saying, it's never saying that it's a newspaper, or it's a corporate entity that it's a social network, and you pay to use it. It's free, but if you want to actually use it, you have to pay
got
for
to pay
ads.
some money. I think it was Sacha Baron Cohen recently said that Facebook would have given Hitler a Facebook ad campaign, you know, if it was at the time. So yeah, I mean, you definitely hit the nail on the head there. Complexity. I think the word of the week for me is nuance. You know, and the idea that nothing is as simple as it seems. But look, I think that, you know, my own personal thing is about pretty much the same as you, trying to figure out what can I do, what is my purpose, and how does my story lead me to being the right person at the right time, because that's all it is, right? You know about timing more than anyone. So I'm looking forward to seeing to seeing all of your work coming up in the future, Mark. Listen, mate, there's a very few words that could summarize you know, the amazing relationship we've had, just from a, you know, mentor, reverse mentor, whatever you want to call it, just from an inspiration
Meeting in a
point of view.
corridor in FutureWorks and just giving time to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, what can you know, what can we do? What can I do? What can my community do to support future artists, support your work? Where can we find you? Pitch yourself.
Oh, well, I mean, just jump onto our socials, I guess, and then follow us. And then when something pops up that's relevant, engage with the conversation, and choose to come to something if it floats your boat and you're into it. We're very diverse, without trying to be trendy or cool or anything. I enjoy diversity. So it could be anything from history of video games to a feminist play Skank. And then everything else in between. So Future Artists on Facebook, so Facebook.com/Future Artists, Twitter, Future Artists, futureartist.net, which is our website, loads of information on the events that we do there. And you can find me, Mark Ashmore, on LinkedIn. Just link into me there and I'll try and answer stuff. So, and it's me that's mainly on all the socials, so you'll be chatting directly to me, and then when it gets busy, we've got other members of the team that get involved, but pretty easy to find. And but that should be like anybody that wants to make a difference in their community. You need to be the one doing the work and the one pitching in. So these corporations, who knows that's in charge of their social media, but you're not talking directly with them and stuff, and that's breaking down now. And you know,
well, look, Mark, you've always been the people's champion, and you know, now it's becoming the business champion, and in the future you'll be, you know, regarded as another champion. You're always innovating, you're always leading
as long
the
as I
team.
can pay the bills, do good work, and have something good to eat and hang out with my friends, that is literally all I want to do. You got to keep it very zen, you know. So there's no ego in all this sort of stuff. I really genuinely enjoy the act of creation and new ideas and meeting inspiring people and helping them on the journey, and they can also help me, which is, I guess, the relationship we've got, Cam. So,
oh mate, well, the world is lucky to have you. Mark Ashmore, thank you so much for coming on to CamTalks. We will catch up again soon.